Velvet shadow, still many stories unspoken. Not here, Ethan, please, not now. She swiftly dismissed Lynn as if brushing her off. We stood on their Connecticut driveway, my hand halfway to hers, fingers open and waiting. I hesitated longer than necessary, feeling foolish. Eventually, I withdrew my hand. "All right," I replied. She continued towards the front door without glancing back. Inside, the house retained its familiar scent, polished wood, coffee, something baked. Her mother's voice echoed from the kitchen, her father overly enthusiastic with his humor. All greeted Sarah affectionately. I received handshakes, friendly and polite. At the table, I behaved appropriately. I smiled when it was expected, laughed during appropriate pauses, answered work-related questions carefully, passed dishes, filled glasses, remained attentive. I avoided touching Sarah. I didn't lean towards her. She didn't catch my gaze, yet she sensed it, as evident by her relaxed posture and settling comfortably in her seat. This was what she desired: detachment, distance, and avoidance that neatly adhered to boundaries. Chris was seated opposite us. He poured wine with an air of belonging, chatting effortlessly with her father. When he leaned towards Sarah to whisper something soft, she responded with a prompt smile. At a certain moment, her fingers grazed his shoulder briefly, unnoticed by all. It wasn't meant to be noticed. I remained composed, unfazed, listening attentively. Then Sarah glanced at her phone, first once, then twice, subtly hiding the screen from me each time. Chris was always looking at her. When I pushed my chair back, I paused momentarily, giving her an opportunity to halt me. However, that pause seemed longer than it should have, hinting at her reluctance to interrupt. I had enough time to realize she wouldn't look up, and long enough to comprehend that I had become unseen. The silence didn't originate at that table. It began weeks prior in our bedroom late at night. The first instance, I extended my arm as I usually did across her waist, my hand resting where it once belonged. She moved instantly, turning towards the wall as if she recalled an undone chore. Her back was to me then, no words exchanged. Minutes passed before I made another attempt, this time at a slower pace, carefully avoiding haste. She pulled the blanket higher around her shoulder, isolating herself without uttering a word. The same bed, the same space between us on another night. The room was dark save for the alarm clock. I watched as the red numbers shifted while she breathed steadily, already lost elsewhere. That night I refrained from touching her. Instead, I lay there, gazing into the darkness, waiting for sleep to replace what she wouldn't. From then on, I ceased to initiate closeness, neither as a gesture nor as retaliation. It was simply that I was unsure which facet of myself was acceptable anymore. In the mornings, she maintained her routine coffee, casual conversation, plans for the weekend. If she sensed the distance between us, she didn't acknowledge it. If she found comfort in it, she concealed it better. By the time we reached her parents' home, I was already aware of the boundary. I just hadn't realized how extensive it was. At the table, observing her lean towards Chris, noticing her phone glow and disappear again, it became clear. She preferred more distance, so I remained in the position she had assigned me. For the first time, I pondered what might occur if I didn't remain there at all. Once I resumed my seat, things settled down. Sarah spoke more freely, not louder but more effortlessly. She shared a tale from work, used her fork for emphasis, chuckled when appropriate. Her mother nodded in agreement. Her father offered unwarranted advice. The table's pace felt soothingly routine. I remained unchanged, pleasant, engaged, detached. Responding without glancing at Sarah when her sister inquired about our stay, Chris noticed the shift subtly, filling the void with his chatter and pouring more wine. He blended seamlessly into the scene like a forgotten piece of furniture. When Sarah spoke, he paid attention and she turned to him naturally. Their attention didn't waver because nothing was amiss. They were oblivious to the absence, not because anything was missing, but because it was hidden from them. I observed the entire scene from my position, giving approving nods and warm smiles, ensuring I didn't intrude. I wasn't agitated nor wounded. I remained vigilant instead. There's a distinction. At a certain moment, Sarah cast a quick glance at me as if to check on herself. I reciprocated with a subtle, courteous smile, the kind typically exchanged among office colleagues during meetings. She responded with a return smile before turning away. It was then that I recognized this tranquility wasn't serenity, it was preparation. As Chris stood up, holding his glass and whispering something to Sarah, gesturing towards the kitchen, I knew exactly what would transpire next. Without asking for approval, Sarah rose. "I'll be back in a moment," she informed the table, already moving away. I watched as she vanished into the kitchen, leaving behind echoes of conversation. Plates clinked. Her father continued talking. Someone overamplified their laugh. No one but me tracked her departure with their gaze. Moments later, Chris pushed back his chair. He responded nonchalantly, raising his glass as a silent signal. No one disputed it. He followed her as if it were routine, staying in the dining room. I remained where I was, unable to overhear their conversation due to the soft murmur of voices seeping through the doorway. It was too quiet to be innocent and too consistent to be incidental. They didn't hurry back. Time seemed to elongate slightly. A question arose about the salt. Another stood up to check on an unnecessary roast. When they eventually returned, they did so simultaneously. Sarah had a softer smile than earlier. Chris was in mid-sentence, finishing a thought that seemingly hadn't begun at the table. She nodded in agreement to something he said and took her seat, their conversation once again slipping back into silence as if it had never departed. I examined her then, truly looked. She didn't appear guilty or caught. She appeared comfortable. A few minutes later, her phone illuminated on the table. She gave a fleeting glance below, then dimmed the screen with her thumb. Chris sipped wine undisturbed. I lowered my eyes to my food, my hunger vanished, my demeanor relaxed. On the surface, nothing had altered, yet something had irrevocably moved. And as I remained there, observing them inhabit a place that was once mine, I grasped the significance of the warning. The query wasn't about their actions. It was about how far she believed she could advance without any response from me at all. By then, Sarah had adjusted to an unfamiliar rhythm. She avoided eye contact unless necessary. When she did look my way, it was swift, almost clinical, as if checking to ensure I remained present to uphold our agreement. I nodded in response. I smiled appropriately. I kept a distance. This appeared to liberate her. She allowed longer pauses with Chris. She waited for him to complete his sentences before replying. When he leaned nearer, she didn't recoil. Nothing had crossed an obvious boundary. That was the crux of the issue. It didn't have to. One instance stood out. Her father posed a work question to me. I responded coolly and clearly. As I spoke, Sarah remained indifferent, focusing on Chris swirling his wine. Upon concluding my sentence, the conversation continued. For about a minute or two, I sat there, then I sensed it, the moment where I either stayed, maintaining the role I'd been given, or acted in a way that could not be undone. I subtly pushed back my chair, testing the sound. No one reacted. I looked at Sarah once, long enough for her to notice, feel the shift in the atmosphere, and reach out to me, even with her eyes. But she laughed at something Chris said, head tilted, eyes shining brightly, fully turned away. That was it. I stood up. The chair's legs softly scraped against the floor, interrupting the conversation more effectively than anything else that afternoon. The hushed room, everyone paused, and Sarah gazed at me. It was then that I declared my departure. "I apologize," I said calmly. "I must leave." For a brief moment, no one stirred. Forks hung in midair. Someone's glass was moments from their lips. Sarah seemed to have skipped a beat. Immediately, I indicated without a word of explanation. I didn't seek approval from around the table. I grabbed my coat from the chair and donned it slowly. Her mother opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Her father cleared his throat. Chris remained silent, eyes fixed on the table as if finding newfound intrigue. "I'll call you," Sarah said hesitantly, standing partially unsure if she was supposed to accompany me. "That's fine," I responded, already striding towards the hallway. I thanked her parents, shook her father's hand, and assured her mother it was great to see her. The words flowed effortlessly like second nature. No one tried to halt me. No one knew how. At the door, I briefly halted to slip on my shoes. I didn't bother looking back. The air outside was chillier than anticipated, and the driveway extended ahead of me, vacant. Her car remained parked neatly by the curb, while mine sat at the end, facing the street. I walked towards it alone. Upon leaving, I refused to glance back at the house. I didn't peer into the mirror to see if she might chase after me. I continued driving until the tumult in my mind eventually ceased. It was somewhere between that driveway and the highway that I made up my mind I wouldn't return to fill a void that had already been relinquished. That night, the house felt odd as soon as I entered. The lights were off, and the air was stale, as if no window had been opened all day. For a moment, I stood in the bedroom doorway, listening to the silence, then moved across the room to open the closet. My side appeared half vacant. The hangers were spread out differently than that morning. The duffel bag I kept on the top shelf was missing. I hadn't explored drawers, they weren't necessary. After shutting the door, I perched on the bed's edge, footwear intact. Solitude was my companion that night. The following morning, my phone pulsed once. A message from Sarah's father inquired about my well-being. We hadn't anticipated Ethan's abrupt departure. I didn't respond. Later during the day, I learned from her mother, then her sibling, brief communications. Initially, puzzlement ensued, no reproaches. Merely queries that no one knew how to pose directly. Snippets of information suggested a subdued breakfast at their home. Sarah stared at her food while her father looked on. Chris was present too, unusually quiet, his coffee untouched. Upon being asked if I'd join them later, there was a pause in the response. Weeks transpired. I kept myself occupied, work commitments, evening outings, nights culminating as I saw fit. I divulged nothing to anyone. I defended nothing. I merely ceased appearing. In the afternoon, while parked opposite a friend's residence, I observed Sarah's vehicle slow down. She didn't alight. She remained seated for a while, gripping the steering wheel with the engine humming before she departed. A message arrived after a week, indicating she wished to converse. She stated she was prepared now, which was the first instance since I left that I paused to ponder my subsequent steps. We arranged to meet a month later in a modest downtown eatery, an unbiased location with no past associations. Sarah had already taken her seat when I arrived, sitting erectly with hands folded around a glass of water. She appeared composed, as if she had deliberately practiced remaining calm. Upon spotting me, she hesitated before resuming her seat. I occupied the chair opposite her. For a while, we remained silent. The waiter delivered menus and departed, leaving an unbroken expanse between us. "I've had ample time to reflect," she eventually said. Her voice was steady. "We both have." I paid attention as she discussed rectifying matters without specifying the issues at hand. She spoke about decelerating, about commencing anew. She did not refer to her parents' residence. She omitted mentioning Chris and appeared to be discussing postponed strategies. When she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers, she did it cautiously, as if measuring temperature. I didn't instantaneously withdraw. Her touch was warm, familiar. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the old routine was trying to resurface, as if all it required was consent. She observed my expression, anticipating something, perhaps relief or agreement. Instead, I gazed at our joined hands, then back at her. I gradually disentangled my fingers, doing so without fanfare. She paused. "What are you doing?" she inquired, not agitated. "I'm uncertain." Without delay, I retorted. "You requested that I avoid touching you," I reminded her, maintaining a soft tone. "Not there, not then." This startled her. That wasn't what I meant. Acknowledged my words, meeting my gaze. Silence followed as she seemed to ponder. For a brief moment, it appeared as if she might contest. Her mouth parted, then closed once more. She cast furtive glances about the restaurant, at other tables and indifferent patrons. "That was unlike before," she said. "That was in front of my kin." I gave a single nod. Carefully, I withdrew some cash from my wallet and placed it beneath my coffee cup, covering our meal expenses. "Is this the course we're set upon?" she asked. I rose from my seat, leaving her still seated, observing me with an enigmatic expression. "I didn't vanish," I replied. "I ceased appearing where I was unwelcome." Her hand hesitated over the tabletop, unsure whether to reach for me again. She refrained. I pushed back my chair, the action echoing in the quiet that separated us. I did not linger for a reply. I left unsoftened words hanging between us, turning towards the door. From behind, her voice called out my name. A solitary time. I remained unmoved. The doorbell tinkled as I exited, the chill of evening air meeting my face. Blending into the human river on the sidewalk, I acknowledged that this wasn't an ending she anticipated. Pausing, I allowed the door to shut by itself. The throng was lively, individuals moving in diverse directions, pairs colliding, a chuckle echoing from a phone call. I drifted with them for a block before halting and gazing back at the restaurant through its window. Sarah remained. She hadn't trailed behind me. Sitting precisely where I'd left her, her hands now flat on the table, fixedly staring at the vacant seat opposite hers. The waiter came near, whispered something indistinct. She nodded once. Gradually, I walked away. That night, I returned to a domain that was all mine. The spaces were tranquil, yet not void. I placed my keys there. I hung up my coat. I slumbered without yearning for someone who had receded already. Days slipped by, then weeks. In this version, the text has been paraphrased to maintain the full meaning and approximate length, while using different words and sentence structures. No further messages requested conversation. No late-night apologies or clarifications followed. Instead, silence ensued, mirroring the void that had been present all along. A few weeks later, I unexpectedly encountered her father at a supermarket. We both nodded, uncertain of what words to exchange. No inquiries were made regarding events post my departure on that Sunday. Details were unnecessary, as I'd already witnessed enough. The image that lingered was not the instant she withdrew her hand on the driveway, but rather how effortlessly she released me and how long I'd feigned obliviousness. I departed without anger or intention to prove a point. I left because my presence held no significance when it was merely endured, and for once, upon ceasing to be present, I didn't vanish. Instead, I found myself in another place.